What a sense of timing. It was pretty amazing to come in knowing where you were in the introduction there. I appreciate that. I very much apologize for being late. I consider being late a sign of rudeness. Forgive me. If you can imagine, this traffic was all tied up on Interstate 465 because there was an accident up there, and then starting up I-69, there was yet another accident. So, bad day for motorcycles on I-69 too. But we are glad to be here, as I'm kind of catching my breath. And as I say to all the Tea Party groups and all these groups that have come together, Freedom Maker groups, over the last couple of years, as a Republican, as an office holder, as a candidate in the last election, and even going forward as a candidate in the next election, I have, as I like to say, but 3 words for members of the Tea Party. God bless you. You guys have done good. Done more to bring the Republican Party that I do take pride in. You've done more to bring us back to our roots of being about what we should be about, which is to say smaller government, lower taxes, and greater individual freedom and responsibility. Those two do go together. It wouldn't be happening if it weren't for the activities of all of you. You know, what has come about in the last couple of years since the election of Barack Obama is a sense of American activism that certainly is absolutely unprecedented in my lifetime. And I don't think that we have begun to see the end of it. And in many ways, and forgive me, as I heard that part of the introduction, I love American history. And I want to talk to you for a minute about American history, just to kind of set the stage for what the main comments are this evening. As someone who loves American history, I've often wondered what it must have been like to be about my present age, soon to be 60, in 1858 or so, 1857, 1858, 1859. Because if you were about 60 years old at that point, throughout your lifetime you had seen crisis after crisis come up in that huge issue, American slavery. It had almost split the country apart in 1820, and then there was a compromise and it went away. And then 20 years later in 1840, there was this huge controversy and it almost split the country apart. And then there was a compromise. In 1850, it happened again. By about 1857 or 1858, I think if you had had your life experience of living through that, you probably would come to the conclusion, you know what, there's not going to be any more compromising. I mean, how can we make any more compromises? I think if you were a rational person at about that point, you would have found yourself thinking, there's something coming ahead. And I don't think anyone could have imagined the catastrophe that came in the Civil War. But there had to be that sense where we're getting so far apart that there was some calamity ahead. In that environment, and in fact it was in 1858, that Abraham Lincoln gave what became one of his most famous speeches. It was the speech that he gave when he announced he was running for the United States Senate. And historians record that speech as the House Divided speech. He quoted the book of Matthew. And in that speech, he made that famous statement, which was totally taken out of context by the media. Can you imagine that? He made this speech, and what the media interpreted it to mean was that he was going to predict there was some horrific civil war coming. And that wasn't what he meant at all. But what he did say was, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I do not expect the house to fall. However, I do believe that it will cease in being divided. It will become either all of one thing or all of the other. And what he meant by that was slavery was either going to be totally eliminated from the United States, or it was no longer just going to be restricted to the southern states. It was going to go everywhere. That's what the House Divided was about. Well, in 2011, I'm here to suggest to you that we are in a house divided. You know, this past April, when our federal taxes were paid, 47% of all American households paid no income tax. And I don't mean they got refunds back. I mean they paid no federal income tax. In fact, half of that 47% almost actually got tax money back from the government, but they never paid. Because a few years ago, we revised the welfare program and made it part of the tax code. When 47% are paying no income taxes, they do pay Social Security, but they're not paying income taxes. and 53% are carrying the load, we are a house divided. I believe we are coming to some point in the future, whether it's going to be in the next 2 years or the next 20, I don't know. But I think we're going to cease to be divided. We're no longer going to be that country that all of us grew up in that understand that sense of individual responsibility and, yes, freedom. Or we're going to move into a country that is more like those countries of Europe that are socialist. That they expect not a great deal in life, and frankly, they have a pretty easy way of things. Government takes more and more of their earnings, and they expect government to turn around and give them more and more. And what's the result of that? Look at Greece. You know, the nations now, those of us who deal in the world of economics and finance and watch these things daily, they're actually called the pig nations. P-I-G-S, pigs. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And they are on the brink of collapse because their citizens have come to expect so much from the government that the government can no longer borrow to get it, and they're not generating enough wealth to generate the taxes that can result in people living to that style that they've become accustomed to living. That's one extreme. The other extreme, as I said, is that we move back to the type of America that most of us grew up in, where there was that individual sense of freedom and responsibility, and where government was much less a part of our daily lives. You know, government has just gotten so big in this country that many people who were around 100 years ago could not believe it if they came back today. To understand that today we live in a country where we're being told what kind of light bulbs we have to buy. We're being told how many miles per gallon our cars must get. We're being told how thick the insulation must be in our homes. We're being told how many milligrams of fat or salt can be in the hamburgers we buy at the local stores. My friends, that is not the role of the federal government. I was in D.C. the other day, and a senator there that I had a meeting with asked me, he said, Richard, what is the role of the federal government? First question. I mean, it wasn't like, hi, how are things in Indiana? Who are you? How are things in the trade? No, it wasn't that at all. The very first question was, what's the role of the federal government? I said, well, my study of history, my understanding, you have to kind of put it in context. We had the Articles of Confederation before we had the Constitution. That hadn't worked very well because the federal government was so weak. The states couldn't provide among themselves all that they needed. So they formed the Constitution to provide just enough federal government to offer A, federal defense, and B, to have a structure by which when they needed to collect enough wealth in taxes from the individual citizens, they would be able to do so, only to provide what the 18 enumerated powers of Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution declare they can do. And that person I met with smiled. We got along great. But I'll tell you, there aren't many people like that in Washington, D.C. today. Some of you will remember the famous comment from Nancy Pelosi at one point when she was asked, where in the United States Constitution is there authority to have a mandate that every citizen must buy health care? You remember what her answer was? Are you kidding me? Why would that question even be asked? That's how out of touch much of Washington, D.C. is today. We have to reduce the size of government. We have to reduce the involvement of government in our daily lives if we want to understand the true blessings of freedom and liberty.